My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans. Hello and welcome back to MagisTalk. My name is Ian Peoples and I'm joined by my Jesuit brother and co-host Daniel J. Finucane.
Got a middle initial today.
Yeah, Joseph, right?
Joseph.
Daniel Joseph Finucane.
Thank you.
And this is a big one.
This is a big one. This is our series finale.
The final episode.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we'll try not to be too sad.
No one's gonna die at the end.
Hopefully. But no, we've had this is our 70th episode, and that's a lot of episodes.
That is one episode a week for almost a year and a half.
For 70 weeks.
For 70 weeks. You
could say.
Yeah. If our math is right,
it's right.
For 70 weeks.
It's been a while. But we thought that what we would do for our final episode is to do a little bit of reflecting on our time here in Belize, our time with you, and what we're looking forward to in the near future. And maybe not so near future.
That's right.
Who knows?
Looking in the far distance.
Yes.
Well, let's start. Our first question that we will both answer is, what is a story that captures your time in Belize? And so, Dan, I'm going to throw that one over to you first.
Yeah.
And then I'll answer it.
Yeah. So this question is a question that we asked Jeremy, Father Jeremy.
Yep.
And I remember he really struggled with the question. And I've had time to think about this question, and I don't know that I have a great answer or a story that immediately comes to mind. But I think what I'll do is just share like a moment, and it's not that profound of a moment, I guess, but it's a moment when I felt at home here, because I think we probably shared a little bit on the show that our first year, well, my first year here and your first year and a half, the pandemic was a big part of our experience in Belize, and so it was just not a great time for meeting new people and adjusting to a new culture and country. And but I remember in Advent last year, so this is December, helping with a Taizé prayer night at St. Martin's, and just like seeing everybody who was there and people coming up afterwards. And just feeling this sense of, these are people that I've gotten to know over these past few months, who came and we all just prayed together and did some music. And this feels like my home now. And I had worried for my first year of being in Belize that this wasn't home. People would say, how's it going? And I'd kind of smile, but deep down I was like, well, I don't know anybody yet, So just having that sense of home, and that it came at Martin's, which I think is home for so many, and feeling welcomed in that space and being very grateful for the people that are there that I've had a chance to meet. So that would be my story. How about you?
Yeah, this recently just happened, but I think it really is, in some ways, symbolizes a lot of my, so much of my experience here, especially as you mentioned, my first year and a half, maybe a little more of my time here in Belize was just deeply impacted by the pandemic. So I was at the prison and I was in community with the Jesuits, and that was my experience. And so this story comes from the prison, and I've worked with a lot of young men, especially at Wagner's Youth Facility, who have come and gone, some of them multiple times. You know, I've worked with some young men who have been murdered after leaving, and a lot of it has felt like there have been moments where I've really experienced some despair about, okay, why am I here? What am I doing? You know, and God would come to me in those moments when I entered into prayer in that state, and God would remind me that I'm helping show people and remind people of His love, showing people His love, and reminding people that they are loved, you know, by showing them love myself. And so God always did remind me. But just a couple weeks ago, one of those young men who I've been working with for close to 2 years now was received into the church. So he was baptized, he was confirmed, he received First Holy Communion, which I shared with, I think, on the show a few weeks back, all at the chapel at Belize Central Prison. And he took the name, his confirmation saint was Ignatius. Ignatius of Loyola, so the founder of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And it just feels like this was a gift from God, you know, at the end of my time, like that this young man who was adamant, because I told him, I was like, because he would ask, oh, I want to become Catholic, and I would tell him time and time again, you have to be the one to really lead this, you know, because I'm not going to proselytize. I'm not going to force this on you. This has to be your choice right now, right? And throughout the course of the past, you know, year and a half, he was consistent. And finally, I felt we were ready for him to receive the sacraments, and he did. And it was just a very joyful day. And so please pray for Ignatius, we'll call him. And I've thought about that recently, kind of in prayer. Would he have ever sought out, you know, to be baptized or to be received into the church without me being at Wagner's? And there's a good chance that the answer is no. And so I'm just deeply grateful that, you know, that I can look at Ignatius and trust that, okay, God has used me here. And not only through, you know, the sort of fruit that Ignatius's entering the church is, I feel, a fruit of my ministry, our ministry out at the prison, but that it's a sign of maybe the other sort of unseen fruits and the unexpressed desires to be a member of God's family and to know God's love. And I think that has been at work maybe in more people than just Ignatius there. So just very grateful for that experience. Yeah.
That's a good lead in, you know, to our next question, which is a question that we ask our guests all the time. And we have the easy job of just asking the question and having them answer, but now it's our turn. And, you know, where are your hopes for the Belizean church?
Yeah, I think there are so many good people who are involved in the church here, and people are so hungry to be the church for others. One of my great hopes for the Catholic Church here in Belize is to take that experience of communion, of community that we receive inside the walls of the church, and to go out and to as we are missioned at the end of Mass, right, to go out and proclaim the gospel of the Lord, right, to really be a church that is in the streets, right, and to draw people in, right. So that there's this we are a church of mission, right, and people are hungry to be church, and people are hungry to be a part of the church, to be a part of a community. So my great desire is that we become, or we grow into our identity as a church that really is working in the world, right, to draw people to God. Because I think the hunger is just there. And that's not only in the work of evangelization, which is so important, you know, proclaiming the word, but also service, right? You know, again, we talk about Matthew 25 a lot in this, where Jesus says, giving drink to the thirsty, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, sheltering the homeless, that when we do these things, we are serving Christ, that we're doing them for Christ and to Christ. And to take that really seriously here in Belize, because we see the need. And I think this country is especially blessed because it is small enough that there is a real sense of, I have a real sense of the possibilities of actually making a great impact here. Whereas maybe if I was in a place like New York City or Los Angeles, where there are millions of people, making an impact there feels overwhelming. It feels like it's impossible. Here, it doesn't feel impossible. It really doesn't. It just it takes a lot of work. But I mean, that's my hope, though, is that more people have a sense of the real impact that the church can make here, and has made, of course, has made, but a great desire to continue to make. So going back to, what are your hopes for the Belizean Church? Where are your hopes for the Belizean Church?
Yeah, I think I have two, and these are really grounded in my experience of teaching teachers at SJC for the past year. And it's really hope I see in them and their work. And the first is that the Belizean Church will become Belizean, more Belizean, and which is not to say it isn't currently, but I think that there's a way in which, because for so many decades it was missionaries coming in, and I think that Belize is a young country, and it's still very much figuring out its identity. And, there's a way of looking at that as a very challenging and maybe even overwhelming thing. But it's also exciting. I mean, there's a way in which the story's very much at the beginning of unfolding. And so I think figuring out what it means for the church to be Belizean, that one of the really wonderful things about Vatican II is that it really brought emphasis back to the local church and its importance, and the importance of enculturation. And certainly there are elements of that already. The Griffina Mass at Martin's is a little microcosm of the way that Griffina Catholicism has really done this work of enculturation, the use of Kapal, in Mayan liturgy. So there's already stuff here, but I think more maybe, what does it mean for the Belizean Church to exercise its prophetic voice? And that's my second hope. Again, from the teachers that I had a chance to be with, seeing, the things that they were naming as issues in Belize that Catholic social teaching speaks to. Things like economic inequality, the fact that there is so much violence, but that violence doesn't just occur in a vacuum. There's causes, right? Poverty, lack of education, lack of access to good jobs. Doing looking at root causes, and then having the boldness and the courage to say the way things are is not actually the way the gospel calls us to live. And if we really take seriously what we do on Sundays for an hour, then it's not going to just be for an hour on Sundays. We're going to have to, as you were talking about, bring it outside of the four walls and put it into action. And I think that I have hope that the more that people learn about things like Catholic social teaching, the more that the Belizean Church can take a look at it and see, where is it that we're called to speak out and to act? Because there's no shortage of issues and realities that are here. But most importantly, it's about the fact that it's not, Catholic social teaching isn't ultimately about addressing social issues. It's about helping people. And I think that the good work that's already happening can continue to just unfold more and more. So that's the hope that I have.
Yeah, definitely. Well, people may be wondering, Dan, Ian, you're leaving. Where are you going?
Yeah.
Why are you leaving us?
Yeah.
So why are you abandoning Belize, Dan?
Well, maybe we can quote Jesus, for a little while we'll leave, and then
a little while
longer
and we'll be with you again.
With you, hopefully. Yeah, we are leaving because essentially we are moving on to our next stage of formation, which is theology studies. And because both of us are on track to be ordained priests in the Catholic Church, the last stage is to do a deep dive into the very rich theological tradition of the Catholic Church. And so I'll be heading to Berkeley, California, to the Jesuit School of Theology at Santa Clara University. It's a mouthful. That's where I'll be going.
And I'll be going to Boston College, to the School of Theology and Ministry, the STM. And I'll be there 4 years. Dan has probably a little bit shorter of a track, 3 years.
If I behave myself, yes.
If you behave yourself, yes. Yeah. 3 years. Dan has already studied theology and has a master's in theology, but he's going back to become even more masterful of theology. Or
to correct all the errors from the first time.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is, it feels like at the end of my time here in Belize, like I feel ready for theology because of the rich experience of ministry that I think both of us have had here, and the rich experience of pastoral ministry, of really walking with people who hunger and thirst for God, and sort of struggling with how do we communicate, how do we communicate God's love to people in the situations like out at the prison, which is a very brutal and harsh reality. One of the questions I'll be taking with me as I enter theology studies, this kind of gets to the next question, how will your experience here in Belize impact your theology studies? And what I've been telling people is the big question that I've had here in Belize is, what does hope look like for people who are in seemingly hopeless situations? And to give an example that applies to many people, many men out at the prison, if these guys are gang involved, right? Especially those who grew up in maybe Belize City, in the South Side, they're gang involved. Maybe they've committed violence towards other people, whether that's killing someone or simply just maybe shooting at or being associated with someone who's committed violence. They're marked men for the rest of their lives in Belize, right? And so for the rest of their lives, they're going to be watching their back. They have to. And so to take someone in that reality and to communicate hope, what does hope look like? How do we speak the gospel message to people who are in a situation like that in a way that helps them to desire not to be a part of that cycle of violence anymore, even if they remain marked, even when they remain marked, for them to desire to stand with the Lord, right? Facing the real possibility of death, even to those sort of ends, right? Because I think those people, the people who are able to do that, are the ones who will be able to transform Belize. Yeah. At least like the people, they'll be able to be the ones who impact those who are involved in the streets the most. Yeah. Because of their witness, because of their example.
Absolutely. Well, and something, I talk to guys at the prison all the time about this, about look at who God calls throughout the scriptures. He calls a lot of people who've committed murder. Moses, David, indirectly. But
indirectly,
David,
murder for hire, basically.
Yeah, those are like the two most important people in the Old Testament, and yet they have done pretty gravely serious things. Paul, exactly, right. So you have these figures, and because of what they've been through, because of what they've done, it has, as you were just saying, even more sign witness, has profound power.
And so, I think that's going to be something that greatly impacts my theology studies and how I desire to use my theology studies in order to help proclaim God's message of love to people who are in desperate situations. Yeah. Now, when you are asked this question, Dan, so how will your experience here in Belize impact your theology studies?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Any number of things. I think the thing that I've been thinking about the most, and it comes again from teaching, but also I think from the synod, which is ongoing on synodality, but a sense in which who we are as church is how we are, so that church isn't just it's not just a place, and it's not just a noun, but it's actually a verb. That we do church. Church is something we are, we embody in how we are. And I think that it has to move beyond what I think, and I am part of this too, can be very passive. It's kind of like I go to church and I do my prayers, but then the name of our show is MagisTalk. Like, well, what more is there? Where is God maybe inviting you into a deeper engagement, especially with people who are on the margins? So to me, it's that call from Pope Francis to build a culture of encounter, and that it, as he says, and I quote this all the time, but that there's a risk of face-to-face encounter, because it might change you. It might also, you never know, right? But taking the risk allows for God's grace to operate. So I think for me, looking at the ways that I've seen that here in Belize, and the ways that my own taking a risk of encountering people who've done, heinous things, and seeing how God's still at work in their lives.
Yeah.
And how do we as a church do that more? And then how do we allow that to then feed us and help build us up into the church? It's that we go to Mass on Sundays to be reminded this is who we are, this is whose we are, and we go out and then to do it, in the world. And then inevitably we mess it up, and we need to come back. But that there's this interplay, right? And so that to me kind of fascinates me, and I'd love to look more at kind of what do we have in our tradition that amplifies that. And then, how do we put that into practice? How do we inspire people? How do we get people on board with that? How do we get people to seek that more? I think that's what most excites me.
Because I think our generation, and the generation coming up behind us, we see it. We see the desire for justice. We see the desire to make a difference in the world, right? And how do we help them realize that the fulfillment of these desires is the work of the church, right? That's the fulfillment of these desires.
Yes. And we don't do it alone.
Yeah.
It's it has to be a communal activity. It's the problems of the world are not problems that individuals can fix. And they're not problems that individuals caused most of the time.
Most of the time.
It's a matter of remembering we have to co-labor, collaborate.
Little buzzword there.
Little buzzword.
Yeah, collaboration.
Collaboration station.
Speaking of collaboration, we've come to our final question, which was given to us by our trusted cameraman and editor, Nicholas. And Nicholas asked, what future projects do you want to do after MagisTalk? So what's in the works? What are you thinking? Is there any maybe desires of ideal future ministries or apostolic work that you'd want to do, or that you'd want to be a part of?
Man, there's a lot. I think that I guess a kind of more general thing, and then I'll make it specific. So I love the idea of being, because we Jesuits, we run schools. That's a big thing that we do. But that's not it's not just because we like education and think it's great. It's because we think education is a way in which we go out and live the gospel. And it actualizes all these things that are part of us. But I love the idea of like being at a school, but like also being out in the neighborhood and creating a bridge between those two. So like, you know, the person whose vow cross I took, it's a tradition we have when you take vows. You take a vow cross of a Jesuit who's passed away, and the Jesuit I chose, you know, he worked at a university for 30 years, but he was also in a very poor area of the city at the same time as a pastor, and was helping people with housing, you know, and seeking housing rights. To me, like that kind of project, whatever that might look like, of like having one foot in a more academic setting, but then having the other foot out just like in the world where like everybody else lives, you know, and figuring out how to connect those. Like how do we study, not just to like know stuff, but to put it at the service of others. That gets me excited. Specifically, I have no idea, but I think for me, like a very specific project that I would love to do is write kind of a longer essay article on experiences I've had at the prison around this idea of guys often would have trouble with my name.
Finucane?
It was just never Mr. Finucane, and it was never Mr. F or any of that. And even when I said Dan, I'd be like, well, no, like Daniel. And they'd be, the lion's den. And playing with that image, like these guys are in a lion's den, and they talk about that all the time. But like, what shape does that take? Anger, you know, frustration and anxiety, and seeing how that's in me too, and so like writing about that, something I've been exploring for a year, but I need to probably take some time. But again, it's taking like something a little heady, but putting it in contact with the experiences and stories of real people. Wonderful. How about you?
Well, I'll name a project that I'm currently involved in, and I think a way for the people of God here in Belize to keep in touch with maybe some of our writing, maybe a future writing project for you and for me. I've recently been named the editor-in-chief of the Jesuit Post, so the jesuitpost.org. So that's a project that I've been involved in for a while, that I'll continue to be involved in doing. There's a lot of Jesuits. It's by Jesuits in formation, so there's a lot of Jesuits contributing to this, and it's a little bit like MagisTalk in the sense that the topics of conversation are very wide ranging. The topics of articles and videos that the Jesuit Post puts out it covers a lot of ground, and so if people want to be involved or read more about that project, it's the jesuitpost.org, and again, that's something that Dan and I both contribute to as well, and so that's a project that I'm continue to be excited about and be a part of. And I think so there's that, and just a shameless plug, but there's also, I think, there's works that are in development here in Belize that I very much look forward to being a part of, doing the work of bringing our message, bringing the hope that we have in Christ, and sort of doing that work of reconciliation in the broader Belizean society. And so I don't want to say too much more because that hasn't been officially announced, but there are works that the Jesuits are developing that are hopefully going to do that work, and I very much want to be a part of that in the future. Yeah, of doing what Dan and I have been talking about, is just helping people bring the gifts of the church and giving that to the world, and vice versa, right? So maybe at some point one of the Jesuits can come on and to Guadalupe Media is one of the programs and talk about some of those future projects. But until then,
that's right.
This is us wrapping up. Dan.
Signing off, yeah.
Yeah, Dan, thank you for being a workhorse and helping guide this project really, and in our episodes and getting guests, as Dan's really been the main protagonist here, helping organize our episodes and our seasons. So yeah, thank you so much for just being a fun co-host, and this has been a wonderful experience for me. And and I think a big thank you to Nicholas.
Definitely.
Yeah. So thanks to Guadalupe Media for giving us the space, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah, and thank you too. I mean, I think one of the things that's been a great benefit. So Ian has a degree in journalism, and I think that having that presence, like you ask questions and have a way of relating that. Like I'm always like, man, I didn't even think of that. So just your way of being. So thank you as well.
Yeah.
Thanks all around.
And thank you to our audience for joining us this past year and a half or so, and for those of you who have let us know that you watch the show. When we see you in person, it's always a great consolation to us. So these episodes live on YouTube and Facebook, and I imagine will be re-aired on Guadalupe Media. But it's been a real gift for us, and please pray for us as we go forward, and all of you will be in our prayers, and hopefully until we return again one day, God willing, as priests. So thank you all. God bless.